okay, what is the battlefield actually like? Like, I've got experience from Iraq, but that totally different situation, 100%. The guys that came here to just do stupid stuff and get attention, they've all left. She like woke me up and said, "You're not allowed to go back to Ukraine." And I was like, what? I wanted to not just be like one more gun in the fight, you know, I wanted to add 1,000 rifles to the fight, like 1,000 guys that I could train. This is a marathon, it is not a sprint. And if you try to sprint here, you will die. 2 helicopters fly overhead and launch off like a volley of rockets over, and it flies off. I'm like looking out the windows, I'm like, yo, that's sick.
We are here today with Tango. He's an American volunteer who fought in Ukraine for more than a year. He was in Ukraine before the war, is that correct?
Yeah, I moved to Ukraine about 6 months before the full-scale invasion, and I lived in Lviv. I worked as a volunteer, like an English instructor.
Mm-hmm. Tango fought with 2 units in Ukraine, first with GUR Legion, or otherwise known as Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, and then he joined the Chosen company, which was then part of the 59th Brigade. Tango, can you tell a little bit how you ended up in Ukraine before the war? So you mentioned that you were an English instructor, but what actually drove you to Ukraine? Because before that you were in U.S. military, you fought, you deployed with U.S. military. Can you talk us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was working night shift at my job back home, and all my friends were asleep, so I was talking with a good buddy of mine who met his wife here in Ukraine. Because of the time difference, he was awake while I was awake. So he was telling me a lot about the country and that it was very beautiful and the cost of living was, you know, pretty low, you know, by American standards, and that it was a nice place to visit and the people were very friendly. So he told me all this and I said, okay, well, you know, I've got vacation coming up and I'll take some time and I'll just go to Ukraine. I hadn't really traveled much outside of the US at that time, besides going to like Mexico or for military deployments, which those don't count as actually traveling. So I went to visit, stayed here for like a week and a half, and I actually got in trouble with my job because I intentionally missed my flight to go back and had to book another one so I could get my full 2 weeks of vacation, which they didn't approve, but I got it anyways. So I came back after that and I decided, like, in the middle of staying here, I was like, this is a great place. I wanna check this out and see like what the possibility is of me being able to move here. So when I got back, I started making a plan to make that happen. Sold all my stuff. I sold my house. And I was like, okay, if I can make, you know, if it makes sense to do it, I'll do it. So I was looking at the market, sold my house, I would make a profit, that's good. Had to sell my car, would make a profit, so that's good. And so I was like, you know, things are just kind of lining up so that it worked. And so I did, and then I moved here.
What exactly sold you on Ukraine?
The culture, and this is going to sound strange because they're 2 different, very different cultures, but the culture and the people reminded me a lot of Texas. People in Texas are usually very friendly, and they will go out of their way to help you for the most part, especially if they know you. So like when I came to Ukraine, I realized that when I was meeting my friend and his wife and their family and their friends, they were super nice. They were very helpful. They always would try to help me out. Like, and that was cool because that's rare to me to see anywhere outside of my own community back in the US. Like,
you call it a strange thing, but you're definitely not the first American who said that cultures resonate, American and Ukrainian, both kind of the freedom-loving part, individualism. Well, definitely Ukraine doesn't have economic freedoms of the US, but culturally.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Culturally, it clicked with me and I liked it a lot. Plus, I'm a huge fan of history. I love history. And this is like one of the oldest areas, like obviously Europe, but like Ukraine itself is just one of the cultural areas, like with some of the oldest history in all of Europe. So I was like, you know, I gotta check it out. And I did, so I moved here. started just actually kind of randomly working as a volunteer with some friends that I had met in Lviv that had need for native English speakers. And so I was like, oh, well, I had a visa already, but I was like, in the future, maybe I can work for you guys and, make it kind of more official to do it that way. And that was my plan. I loved it. It was great.
Circling back a little bit, you were done with military life when the war started, right? Can you talk a little bit about your military experience in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I did, on active duty, I was an infantryman for a heavy weapons company, Delta Company, 315. So I did a deployment with them to Iraq. We were in Anbar province in Ramadi, and, did that, came back, lived civilian life, went to college, university, and was just kind of living a normal life. And I started doing like security contracting at that point in my life, which it was okay. It was good money, but it was political and kind of unstable. But yeah, so I kind of decided that I wanted to get away from that and really just have the opportunity to travel and to see like the world, which would be great. I thought Ukraine will be like my base camp, and I'll hang out here where the cost of living is really good and I can go to the airport and get cheap travel all over Europe. I wanted to see pretty much everything. And then 6 months later, the war happened and all the airports shut down. So it didn't really work out. My early retirement plan was canceled.
And here you are back in the military. As I was about to pull out, they pulled me back.
Exactly. As soon as I think I'm getting out, they pulled me back in. And here we are. Yeah.
When was the time you decided to try to sign with Ukrainian military?
So I was actually in America when the invasion started. I was visiting my family. Usually I do that. I'll go home for a couple months. That's the plan. But I was visiting them, and I think 3 o'clock in the morning, I want to say my mom came and woke me up because she was awake for some reason. And she saw in the news that Ukraine had been invaded. And, the world was really watching Ukraine at that point because of the massive buildup in the north and everything. And I think my mom came in and she woke me up and said, "You're not allowed to go back to Ukraine." And I was like, "What?" I'll talk about it tomorrow. So I woke up and I saw that I had a bunch of phone calls and missed messages from a lot of my students that I was teaching, and they were really, all the guys were pretty scared. They're like, "Well, we don't know what's going to happen. What should we do? You're in the military. Do you know what's going to happen?" And I'm like, man, I don't know. Just because I was in the military doesn't mean I know anything really. But I kind of decided at that point, I was just like, well, I got to go back. I want to think about it. And I want to research and reach out to maybe some NGOs and other groups that are taking action to help get people and supplies into Ukraine. And that's what I did. My biggest thing was I didn't want to just show up to Ukraine because there was a massive refugee crisis going on. Lots of people were leaving the country and the borders were clogged up. I didn't want to show up and add to the problem. So I kind of sat back and made a good plan to find a group that I could get that had, solid routes of moving people in, like a good pipeline. And that was with Task Force Yankee when they were still operational. And I worked with them and came to Ukraine. I actually came here with the intention of signing up for the International Legion pretty much as soon as I got here. But because it was such a new thing, the offices, we did go and actually speak to the recruiting center there in Yevoriv. I think shortly before it was attacked back right in the beginning. So anyways, I had come here with the intention to do that, and I went to speak with them. And this is kind of an interesting story. Maybe it might not look good, so you can maybe edit it out. I don't know. But I went up there I went to the Foreign Legion recruiting office, or the processing center there outside of Lviv, and went with 2 other medics that I had met en route through Task Force Yankee. One of them was, I think, from Britain, and the other one was from America, who actually was a SWAT, special police qualified medic, and he spoke fluent Russian and Ukrainian, but he didn't have military experience. So we went together to go talk to them, and the International Legion, at the time, they would only offer me a contract because I had prior military experience, but they wouldn't take the guy who spoke Russian and Ukrainian and who was a medic. And I was like, that doesn't really make sense to me. So I was like, okay, hang on. Let me backtrack, let me think about it. So we did that, and kind of as a group together, and with me knowing a little bit more about Lviv and the area, we decided that we're going to work on, instead of joining the International Legion, trying to promote training and training soldiers in Ukraine to bring them up to, I don't want to say NATO standards, but to bring them up to a good standard of like just basic soldiering skills with a particular focus on medical training.
That was exceptionally valuable back in the day, because now we have training facilities, we have the training process. But I remember back early in the days, we were trying to grab any foreigner or even prior, because all the prior Ukrainian military were fighting, unless they were disabled or something. But foreign military personnel, volunteers who came in Ukraine, they were willing to teach TDF units, willing to teach even civilians basic tactical medicine. It was very valuable back in the day. A lot of people with military experience in the United States early in the days, they were kind of on the fence, like they wanted to see some action.
Yeah.
And they were talking. I know there was a lot of talking in the chat between like, guys, are we doing this? Are we joining? Are we going? Should we pack? Should we go? Do you have friends like that from your previous companies, from your previous military, who were like back and forth about it?
Oh yeah, I have a ton of people reach out to me about that. Guys that I knew and guys that I served with as well. And actually, there's one guy from a unit that I didn't even know was out here. He was from my unit, but he was in the unit later after I had left it, and he ended up fighting in Avdiivka as well. He was injured. So, but yeah, I had a lot of people do that. And at first, you know, I was really excited. I'm like, yeah, man, this is what you got to do. And I created this whole list of like stuff, like this is what you need to do to plan for it, prepare for it. You know, you need to get prepare to get a foreign SIM when you get here, have your passport, have cash on you, have a little bit of money, make sure that you've got all this stuff. If you're bringing gear or equipment, you know, make sure that it's clear with customs first, that you have to do this through your process so it doesn't get confiscated. And I made this big list and actually submitted it to Task Force Yankee to try to help them send that out to guys that are wanting to come over. But then after that, I realized as soon as people kind of saw like the amount of effort that it required just to get here, much less like get into a unit and to do other things, that cut out a lot of people that were motivated to do it, which it's honestly, I think that's a good thing, because man, you can't come here without a plan. Like you'll end up being, like I said, part of the problem. We're adding to the problem instead of being a part of the solution.
Especially at that stage.
Yeah, and, especially then.
You mentioned that Legion stopped accepting people without prior military experience. That was exactly the reason, because a lot of people show up with the best intentions,
right,
but no understanding of the situation, and
yeah.
it was a mess in the early days because of that.
Yeah. And it's understandable. You know, it was chaotic, and it was a new organization and a new group. Like everyone was still figuring things out. So like that's normal. Yeah.
Okay, so you joined the Task Force Yankee, you did training, you did NGO. When the next step came to sign with a unit? So
I set a goal for myself that I wanted to not just be like one more gun in the fight. You know, I wanted to add 1,000 rifles to the fight, like 1,000 guys that I could train, that had good training, understood good medical practice, and would be a force multiplier if they were able to train other guys as well. That was my goal. Once I hit that goal, I I was also gauging and getting an idea and like soliciting information from the soldiers I was training, guys that had experience on the front lines here in Ukraine. Like, okay, what is the battlefield actually like? Like, I've got experience from Iraq, but that totally different situation, 100%. So I was kind of building up my knowledge base of the reality of the situation here before I would take the next step to move. So I had a good understanding of what it was I was going into. And also networking and trying to find good units full of, you know, foreigners that were smart, that made good decisions, and they weren't doing cowboy stuff to like get people killed. So after I hit that point, I was like, okay. At the time, I was actually a regional trading director for Trident Defense Initiative in Rivne. So we were training a large group of guys up there close to the Belarusian border. Love them. They're still my boys. Like, I keep in touch with them all to this day. And once they shut that down and moved their operations out to Kharkiv, they had enough instructors, and me and some of the other guys I met working with them were looking for the opportunity to go do some operations and get actual frontline experience. So in the future, we could come back and say, like, yes, we've been there, we've done it, we know what it's like, and these are the lessons that we learned and how we want to help you and improve training again.
early in the days there were Americans who deployed straight away to Kyiv campaign mostly.
Yeah.
Those were mostly hardened battle veterans who had a ton of experience, and they contributed in the early days as well. Have you met any of those types? Have you been able to communicate with them to ask them, okay, what is it like?
Yeah, I have. I've talked to like a number of people like that, foreign volunteers especially, and there's a good number of those guys that were in Chosen Company as well. That many of them, before doing the International Legion, initially deployed to Kyiv to help in the defense here. So like, you know, gaining knowledge from them was super valuable. And I have met a lot of people that have been here, and I've also met a lot of people that have claimed to have been on the defense of Kyiv and probably haven't, but like whatever. Typically, it's a small volunteer community here, and if you know the real ones, then they'll be able to tell you like, hey, who's this guy? Oh, that guy? Yeah, he's cool. Or oh, no, he didn't really do anything.
We know a lot of people who were on big TV like CNN and stuff, who were basically borderline stolen valor. Yeah,
my stance on it is like, I mean, don't do it. Stolen valor is wrong. Like if you feel the need to lie about like what you're doing, then like I don't know what to tell you. It's not cool. Like, don't do it. I'm not gonna like make a confrontation if I see somebody doing that, because like whatever, man. Like if they want to do it, that's their business. I'm not gonna bother them about it. It is stupid, and I think it makes people look bad. It's very bad also for the image of, you know, foreigners in Ukraine, which is something that we, on both operations side and instruction side, that's something that guys that are here trying to help and actually have experience, we have to overcome that obstacle, because a lot of Ukrainians have met other foreigners that come out there and they say, I'm qualified for this and this and this, and I did this and I fought here, and then they go and teach these guys, and it's absolutely like trash. It's a complete lie. Or they're teaching them something that's completely irrelevant. So like, don't do that. You know, we have a very limited amount of time to train these guys, and if they're taking time out of training with their units to get training from foreigners, like, you're cutting into that. It's a bad situation.
You mentioned a very interesting topic about the image of the foreign volunteer here and the Legionnaire in general. Do you think it changed over 2 years of war, or what would you say was the image of the Legionnaire early days in the war, and what is it now?
I think in the beginning of the war, it was very high. Like, we had a very high, or people had a very high image of us, like a decent amount of respect. I think that due to the influx of people kind of coming here looking for attention, not having a plan, making bad examples of themselves, that it's definitely gone down. But I feel that after the initial chaos, now that we're like 2 years into the war, it's, you know, the guys that came here to just do stupid stuff and get attention, they've all left. You know, we're not on every CNN channel running 24/7 anymore. So like, we're not getting the influx of the crazy people. The guys that are here now are actually putting in the work, doing the job, fighting, training, and like vetting and making sure that, you know, we're not associating with people like that, because it does affect our image. So I think that it's kind of rising up again, which is good.
As a Ukrainian, I was always pleasantly surprised by the amount of respect and, you know, generally positive stance of the local population towards foreigners, like gratitude, going out of their way to, you know, do something pleasant for them, to do some gift, share something. It
was always very nice. Ukrainians are super, like I said in the beginning, they're super helpful, especially if you're a normal person and you're not like a wacko doing something crazy. So yeah, if you're just like in a bad spot, people will try to help you. In fact, this is a very recent experience for me. I had to drive my car back from Dnipro, and I had to stop like every 2 to 3 hours to change the fluids out because it was overheating. And every single time that I stopped, I would always have someone stop next to me to try to help me. Every single time. And luckily, on the final time, a tow truck driver stopped next to me and got me back to Kyiv. So it was very helpful. Yeah. Like, you can't be stopped on the side of the road without someone's trying to help you. Like, to me, that's the mark of a very friendly and good, like, culture in society.
But there's also positive things to say about American culture in general, because Americans were the first responders in a way. There were a lot of Americans early in the days. Not saying other nations were not present, but the amount of Americans who came here as both as fighters and NGO helpers, and it's something I took from American culture, that it never even crossed my mind before that people would be willing to go out of their way and get themselves into a dangerous spot to help others. So do you think like Americans don't get enough credit for the charitable nature and the charitable aspect of your culture?
I don't know. I guess
because everyone is, there is a lot of hate towards America these days because of...
I mean, it's a pretty complicated situation, or like a subject to talk about. It's a little bit layered. I would say that like America's global policy, like we kind of run a lot of things on a lot of different levels globally on a global scale. And I think because we have our hands in a lot of different areas and regions, we get a lot of hate for like, on a global scale. But it's also because like, America, the country will represent its interests. We don't typically do stuff for free. Like, I mean, we do help when we do provide a lot of charitable like donations and aid and everything, but that's why we get it, because we've always got other people, Russia, China, other world superpowers that are working against us in many different spheres, whether it's geopolitically or whether it's the information sphere, and it's a lot of things. I think that Americans, like as a people, we absolutely will come to help no matter what. Like it's in our culture to be independent, freedom loving, and to help people that need help. Like we really do try to look out. I mean, at least that's my opinion.
Circling back to joining the unit, what was your choice and why you picked GUR Legion? So
as I was doing the networking and meeting different people, I kind of was looking at different options, which, International Legion was kind of big army, and that was going to be more conventional operations, which is working in trenches or doing assaults and, maybe doing support or artilleries or medevac or things like that. I kind of wanted to see what was available, and so I had met some guys that knew team leaders and operators that were working for GUR at the time. And I was kind of interviewing units as they were interviewing me. So I would ask them, like, it's not a negotiation tactic really, but it is always good to show up with a list of like questions for the unit that you're working into, because you're putting your life, in the hands of these people as you operate with them as a team. So, it pays you well to ask questions. So I would go and ask these guys, and based on their responses, their level of planning, their level of logic, what they were looking to do, at least what they were saying they were looking to do. And I kind of made my decision based off that, with the team leader that I was working with Task Force 47 was our team name. And it was a small, recon and a sniper team. So working with them, I was not a sniper, please. I know everyone around here is a freaking super sniper, Delta SEAL medic, but no, I wasn't.
You're not a sniper. Oh, I know. Have you even been to Ukraine, right?
Exactly. Bam.
Medic. The drone pad.
Whatever. So I worked with the sniper team. I was a backup medic for them. We had an additional medic, and I was just infantry fire team support. I had the grenade launcher, so I was just dropping rounds if we were getting into fights.
I know GUR runs pretty heavy on training. Was that the case back in the day, or not as much as now?
So I know, GUR now is really focused on training, which is good. I mean, it really is. When you're not working on the front, you should be training in the rear or practicing or planning and rehearsing for ops. That's just my opinion. But yeah, they weren't so heavy on it back in the day, I think because they were super focused on Bakhmut. And the situation there was really bad for a long time, still is. But we were trying our best to keep it. And I think that maybe the command and kind of had the mentality of like, we just have to do whatever it takes to hold this. So when I got to the unit initially, we didn't do training with that was provided or directed by GUR, but we trained with ourselves. We created our own SOPs, much like a lot of units have done, and developed our own sort of way we were going to operate, and like our mission criteria, standards for missions that we were going to do, and what we needed from GUR to be able to do these missions completely.
So you joined late 2022, or?
Yeah, it was like September 2022, and then we did like a month month holdover in training in Kharkiv, where we were just training internally as a unit and getting things together, getting all our equipment together, and then we started doing deployments. We deployed down to Kramatorsk, and we're working in Bakhmut there for the next 3 months or so until about
So
Christmas.
basically, your first deployment in Ukraine is straight Bakhmut.
Yeah, straight to Bakhmut.
Hit the ground running.
Well, man, yeah, that was.
What was the day when you arrived at the battle scene? Can you?
Yeah, it was honestly like something out of a movie, man. It was crazy because, like, you know, you could hear from where we were, you could hear the constant fighting. We were really close to it, so it was just constant artillery barrages. Not on our location where we were staying, but you could hear it in the background. Plus, you know, a lot of jets, missile strikes on the surrounding areas as well. So once we got settled in, got all our stuff up, and started getting orders for missions, we were looking at and planning. Our first day in, we're like, okay, so what's the plan? We're gonna go in with half of our team. Some of the guys are going to stay back to just like maintain the safe house. We didn't have a good way to keep all of our equipment secured there at the time. So we were going in an armored vehicle, just rolling through the checkpoints. And I remember getting in the back of this armored vehicle. I'm looking at the axle and I'm like, well, this thing's got a real long back. And if we have to go and like get up and go, I don't want to be in the back of this thing because it's going to pop people up and down and bounce us around like a freaking, you know, like in a tuna can, basically. So I sat on the axle in the middle, but that also wasn't a very good option because there was a generator right in the middle that wasn't tied down. So I was like, you know what, I'll take the generator instead of getting my head smashed, whatever. So we're going in, we go through a checkpoint, and as we pull up to this first checkpoint, these 2 helicopters fly overhead and launch off like a volley of rockets over, and it flies off. And I'm like looking out the windows, I'm like, yo, that's sick. And so we ended up going into headquarters there for a little brief, got back in the vehicle, started making our way forward to our staging point. And as we were crossing a river, I think somewhere on the eastern side, we take a mortar round, not to the truck, but like maybe 5 meters in front of the truck. Luckily, it was really wet in October, so it exploded, but it didn't explode until it hit and penetrated the ground a lot. So it just like shot a lot of dirt up. Thank God, because that would have murked us, man. We would have been done. We were way out in the open too. But they were actually watching us on the drone footage, the Russians were, I'm sure, and timing the time it took trucks to get across this and then coordinating their fire and coming in with artillery. So our Ukrainian drivers were freaking gangsters, and they just floored it after that, bucked it. And so they're going, and this is not clear terrain, man. This is rough. It's all out in the open, like up and down the river valleys, and they freaking floor it. And we're in the back, just like da-doom, da-doom, da-doom. And I've got my leg pinned against this generator, trying to like keep it floored because I know if I don't, and if we roll over, this thing's gonna crush us all and like kill us. So that was like our first intro, and then we get to the headquarters area, like in a big concrete building complex. They let us in. We go in. It's completely dark. This was during the daytime, by the way. Completely dark on the inside. We go down, do a little mission brief, sit for a second, get the plan, then wait for nightfall, and we take the vehicle out again, get closer to the front line to our staging point, get our guide from there, walk in at night with like only half the team had night vision. And it was kind of funny because it was honestly too dark to use the PVS 14, so there was no ambient light because it was cloudy. That was one of our mission parameters, you know, is that if we're infilling within a certain distance to the front, we're only going to do it if it's inclement weather, so they can't track us as well, and they have, you know, limited use of whatever drone and surveillance that they have. So we would always go in on the shittiest weather, and we'd always come out on the shittiest weather, which.
So the drone situation for Russians, even back then, was already pretty solid.
Yeah, as far as the surveillance goes, on their side, the surveillance, their use of drones for surveillance and UAVs for that was spot on. They absolutely had thermals there. It's because at that point, they also had a lot of the Wagner fighters, and they brought a lot of additional gear, higher tier equipment, and were operating differently and more independently from the Russian military. So they were more of like a wild card. You couldn't really tell what they were going to do because they didn't always act like the frontline troops would. So they definitely had assets there for that, and they were surveilling us very well. At that point in time, I don't think they were using dropper drones or FPV drones as much. So like that'll show you what the course of a year can do in a change of a conventional battlefield. We go from my time when I was talking about Chosen, where there's drones every single day. Every time you go into a trench, you're going to catch an FPV and dropper drones on both sides. Back like a year ago, they were just still being used for surveillance. I think that Ukrainians at that time were utilizing the dropper drones in areas of Bakhmut, but it's not something that we like saw personally, or they weren't attached to us doing that, so I didn't like see it happening, but I'm sure that it was. But yeah.
How do two militaries back in the day compare, especially in Bakhmut area, so Ukrainian side and the Russian side? So you already touched briefly that Russian side was comprised of basically two separate fighting forces, Wagner, that were semi-independent and creative, and the conventional Russian army. But what about Ukrainian side?
So on the Ukrainian side, though, that's just, there's always, different tiers, different levels of operations in any military. So you have like your conventional forces, which are, your infantry and direct lines, like all of that. And then you have like, specialized teams or like small teamwork. So like your snipers, your recon, your UAVs, your drone pilots and stuff like that. So those teams typically operate a little differently, especially when you have a situation where there's a front line that's constantly being held and contested. Like my team would be on the sort of, I won't want to say like a higher tier, but we operated a little more independently. So we would actually solicit work from Ukrainian commanders and ask, hey, we've got these assets, how can we help you? And so anytime we would get a call in our AO, like, hey, they're dealing with what we assume to be snipers. Like, we're taking accurate sniper fire over the course of this much time, so on and so forth. We think they might be Wagner. And anytime we would get a call like that, we would go and embed with those guys, deal with the problem, and then get out. So while they were holding the line, and Wagner was doing the same thing, they shift fire, they do different operations and raids and assaults, and because they have the assets, the equipment, and likely better training, they have more independence and the ability to move and affect the battlefield in a different way with specialized skill sets.
How did Wagner combine both the unskilled inmates and trained professionals they had since Syria days, Libya days?
So I would assume that they combine them in the same way. I want to say that the prisoners that were not like conscripted and that were a part of Wagner, I don't know what the difference is, to be honest. But I assume that Wagner got those dudes because they probably wanted their own independent meat shield force, which is exactly the fate of all the conscripts and the prisoners that get sent to go fight in the front line. Russia never puts their best guys in the trenches to get killed and eat artillery all day. They put the guys with no training and no life expectancy in there, which are the prisoners and the convicts. That way, whenever we try to assault like we did in Chosen Company, kill those dudes, they don't have a problem dropping mortars on the position before we even get there. But they don't have a problem killing their own guys. They'll do that like in a heartbeat because they're not their best. They don't have anything invested in them. They're just meat with a gun. So that's
what's bothering a lot of Ukrainians, that Russia is basically disposing of.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I noticed it's not guys usually from Moscow. You won't find passports on dudes from Moscow. It's guys from Dagestan and freaking Siberia. It's all the small rural areas where, I don't know.
Do you think Ukraine should utilize this tactics of, at least we're definitely not going to be using meat wave tactics, but maybe should we introduce inmates to the battlefield?
I don't know. That's kind of a touchy subject.
Just your personal opinion on that.
My personal opinion, it's a smart thing to do if you don't have any better options, honestly. I mean, from a social perspective, you're clearing your prisons. It's very likely they're going to die, and they're kind of the lower end of, society. It's just how it is. Societally, that's how we just look at prisoners. I am not a political science major, so I can't answer that in depth. I would say that brutally, on a logical level, yeah, it's a smart thing to do because, you need people to hold it, and you don't want to lose your good fighters that have experience to do it. Is it morally correct? No, it's really bad. But
the problem is, some people mention that the problem here is that Russians are they don't wear white gloves. If their inmates get tacky or get stubborn, they just basically execute them. And Ukraine cannot utilize that kind of tactics because we still kind of have this small thing as human rights.
Exactly. No, I agree. Yeah, I do. In fact, I read an article about I think it was not a syndicate, but like a smuggling group or something that was promising dudes in India, like good high paying jobs in Russia. Yep. And then they would Shanghai them and send them to the front. Like, yeah, that's bad. That's bad. So.
Yeah, we just recently there was an interview with some, I think, Southeast Asian guy who was somehow survived this whole experience, who joined the Russian military basically for the money.
Yeah.
And he said that we were just sent in the meat waves. And we get a lot of shit from foreigners who want to join the Legion and go straight away, and they don't understand that we are not putting Legionnaires into meat waves. That's why we need officers who can train with them, speak their language.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. It is a long and sort of frustrating, it can be a long and frustrating process, but like, I've always said this to everybody that I've worked with here, like, this is a marathon, it is not a sprint. And if you try to sprint here, you will die.
And a lot of people came late 2022 because they had the fear that they might miss the fight. Because Kharkiv counteroffensive, then Kherson counteroffensive, and we're like, yep, Russia is crumbling. I need to join. Then in 2-3 weeks, we're gonna be in Crimea. Didn't happen that way, right?
Yeah, I wish. It would have been nice.
Would be nice. Vacation in Crimea.
Oh, yeah.
Especially since you're a history buff, you would love it there.
Yep, I want to see it. Maybe one day.
What's your take on the way the Bakhmut campaign in general turned out to be? Was the exchange rate worth it? Was the Bakhmut campaign worth it? Just from your perspective, I obviously everybody had their own.
Yes, from my perspective, man, it really is a battle. It's a battle of attrition in that, like, we tried to bleed them as much as possible, and it was a delayed retreat. That's ultimately kind of where we ended up being in Bakhmut. And man, I want to say we did serious damage there. We cut holes into their forces big time, and their manpower, and a lot of stuff. Like, we really did a lot of damage in Bakhmut, and we did delayed retreats. So I would say the exchange rate for them, they lost significantly more than anybody that we lost, including injuries. So was it worth it to hold it? Yes. Could it? I mean, there's always room for improvement and stuff, but like, yeah, was it worth it to hold it? Yes, absolutely.
In a way, people kind of forget that Wagner as a fighting force was done after Bakhmut, because their insurgency wouldn't have happened if they were super successful, you know.
Yeah, that Bakhmut was the end of Wagner. And it's funny, actually, now I've seen, it's like on several Telegram pages, Wagner advertising to guys saying basically, don't go fight in Ukraine, you can make way more money in Africa. It's like, wow, that's true, you're just gonna die. Or what was it? No, they said,
There was a saying, if you work in Ukraine, your family gets good money.
Yeah.
If you work in Africa, you get to gain the money.
Very true. But yeah, man, Bakhmut was the end of Wagner. They fought hard, and they're not to be like trifled with. Those dudes were good. They were soldiers. They were killers. Like, you know, knowing that you had Wagner working on an opposite side, like, against you, that, like, I've been in combat before, but that was like, that's a pucker factor. It really is, because you know those guys, they're not messing around. They've got skills and training. They've got good equipment, some Western equipment.
Was it the hardest fighting force you've ever encountered?
In Wagner? I don't know, man. They died like everybody else. So,
I mean, that's on an organizational level, on tactics.
On a tactical and organizational level, I'd say they were one of the premier fighting forces. They really were.
We have very conflicting views on that, because some say that Russian regulars, and especially higher end Russian infantry like VDV or their Spetsnaz, they are far superior to Wagner.
Nah, I would say Wagner is on a VDV level, if on a, like, with varying degrees of that, of course, like we talked about earlier with Wagner recruiting the convicts. Those guys are just their meat shield, right? So they're down here. Wagner's probably on a VDV level, and they do have operators that work on a Spetsnaz level, like the special forces level, because they're not going to be your new guys. They're going to be probably your most experienced, likely your officers and NCOs, guys that are in charge, that are running operations and want it to be successful. So they are, dudes that have survived probably, trial by fire. Like they're still alive after however many years of operating in warfare. Like that's
like the same fear the men who are old in the profession where young men die.
Yeah. So. No, they were a good fighting force. I don't know exactly what's happening with them now, but I mean, Bakhmut was a hell of a fight. It's unfortunate. Well, it's unfortunate for them that they lost so many of their guys there because, and I'm happy too, because as soon as Wagner left, I'm like, dude, that's 25,000 of the best battle-hardened soldiers that are not in Ukraine fighting anymore. When that coup happened, and I was like, that's a blessing, because yeah, 100%.
Bakhmut was also probably one of the prime examples of a fancy word, CQB.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to do say CQB because they've seen footage, I don't know, your Navy SEALs doing the breaching.
Yeah.
What about that? So were there any other examples like Bakhmut for CQB, or was Bakhmut CQB?
Bakhmut, yeah, certain levels of it were. If you were taking villages or clearing areas that were recently, taken or being retaken back, you would have to do CQB. Realistically, I would say it's in my opinion, focus way less on CQB, which is CQB is specifically like entering, clearing buildings. Yes, it's really good, and yes, it does have a high casualty rate if you have to do it and it's occupied. But realistically, any main focus of your training should be working on MOUT, which is military operations in urban terrain. So understanding how to work and navigate in urban environments where you do have hard cover, but you're also, working around very tricky and like in an asymmetric type environment. So that was the biggest challenge, I would say. It's less about being able to enter and clear a room and stack like a Navy SEAL, more about understanding and using your logic to make safe routes, avoid detection and surveillance, and keeping your guys alive, having backup plans and contingencies in place to where you're gonna go if stuff really goes sideways. That was a big key to our success. And knowing when to pick your battles too, depending on your mission set is your mission. If you're a small team, you're going into an area to deal with the problem. You're not gonna, if you get engaged from a distance, you're not gonna go back and engage and fucking bound 300 meters to take some enemy trench line just because they shot at you. No, you're gonna lay down, you're gonna move to your objective, and you're gonna do your job. That's the difference. A lot of Americans come here thinking with an infantry mindset, okay, I'm being attacked, so I'm gonna freaking lay down suppressive fire, someone else is gonna flank around and do that. That's not this kind of war, man. We're not fighting in that environment.
I know your team hasn't suffered any casualties in Bakhmut.
Yeah.
Any KIAs at least. What was the reason of that success? Was it picking your battles? Was it playing? Was it equipment? What was it?
It was all of those things. It was having a good team leader who was not afraid to say, no, that's a stupid mission. We're not going to do it. And if you want us to do it, we're going to do it this way. And this needs to change. It was having good planning, good recon, being able to operate and rehearse everything we were going to do, plan study sessions for everybody that was on the mission, so we always knew what we were doing. Good equipment kit, loadout checks, some specialized equipment that we had, but it was way less about equipment and more about training and rehearsing and having intimate knowledge of the area that you're working in, the route that you're going to take to get there, your mission itself, and all of the contingencies and plans that you need to have in place. If something goes bad, which it's Murphy's Law, something will
definitely go bad.
It's not, Murphy's Law, man. It'll go bad, always.
Back in GUR compared to Chosen, was it less or more cooperation with Ukrainians? And I mean Ukrainians, not Ukrainians of your unit, but adjacent units, other units in the sector, more or less?
I would say that it was almost an equal amount. Yeah, we really did. Even in Chosen Company, that's what really attracted me to go to Chosen initially, is I saw, and I asked them, I'm pretty sure I talked to them before going to the unit, hey, what's the plan for this? What do we do for this? What do we have for this? And they gave me good answers about it, and it was logical. It was, we plan for this. This is what we've been training for. These are our contingency plans, and this is our, approach to mission training and study and area and understanding. And so hearing that was good. So like I said, pick your units, make sure you know who you're fighting with.
But my question is a little bit more of a cooperation with the Ukrainian unit.
Oh, so yeah, cooperation with
There's
Ukrainian.
always a language barrier. There's always a question for a lot of Legionnaires who come here with a clear mind. It's always they think, okay, I'm a foreigner. I don't speak necessarily the language here. How will I cooperate with other Ukrainian units?
Yeah.
If I'm ever in a situation like that.
Right. Well, I mean, that goes back to planning and contingencies. You know, communication is one aspect, a very big aspect of an operations order. So having good interpreters, having, you know, a plan of how to communicate with different units of what you're doing, like as you advance or as you move through a mission, that's all part of like just working into the planning phase of any operation. In Chosen Company, I would say that we did a really good job of that as well. We always had interpreters working with us to help us if we needed to communicate with Ukrainians, whether it would be by radio or being with us on missions. Like
You had interpreters on the battlefield.
we had interpreters not on the battlefield like itself. They were contracted soldiers, but we had them typically in the back, like, you know, like HQ and stuff, and in the rear for the most part, because their biggest, you know, their biggest job was communications, which if communications go down in a battle, then you lost pretty much. So yeah, we had them, yeah, pretty much working with us on different levels, but, you know, from a command and control aspect.
Have you ever been in a situation where lack of comms, specifically because of language barrier, kind of compromised the mission for you?
No, not really. Because like I said, you have
You can always go around with yelling and Ukrainian swear words, right?
No, I haven't had no like complete mission failure. I mean, obviously some hiccups. Like there's obviously going to be some hiccups, but that's Murphy's Law, right? That's why we plan for failure. We not plan for failure, but we create contingencies for what if this happens? What are we going to do to adjust? And so yeah, no complete breakdown of any mission due to communication, really. You know, that I can remember. It was funny in Bakhmut, actually. After the end of one of our missions, my boss was trying to use Google Translate to ask if we could shoot a rocket off at a Russian checkpoint that was down the road before we left. And he was telling this to the commander, and I was like, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. Like, we're just going to shoot a rocket off and then bounce? You know, we're going to piss these guys off and leave? Like, come on. And so I'm like, well, you should use Google Translate maybe and ask him. And then, because the Ukrainian commander was like, rocket. Yeah, okay, rocket, cool. And then he's like, oh, yeah, we're going to do it. I'm like, maybe you should ask him again. And he did it. He's just like, no, yeah, like, screw that. So.
Can you talk a little bit about the atmosphere in Bakhmut? It's all gray and gloomy, something of a baleful song.
Man, it really depended on where you were. In the trenches, I didn't do the trench work outside of Bakhmut and on the edges. We were mostly working in the cities. So like in the cities where they had hardened positions that Ukrainians were just holding, I want to say that the morale was pretty high, actually, surprisingly. Like, dudes were there, but, like, you know, they had figured out ways to get generators, so they had heat and they had, like, warmth. They had established command points and set up, like, they would be down there and have, like, you know, cooking food. And then it was a really weird situation, honestly, because, you know, there's this massive war going out and everyone's just hanging out down kind of in the basement. There's tank rounds hitting the side of the building, mortars coming in and artillery. And if you're not up in, you know, the actual tower, the stairwell portion about, like, to fight or keeping a watch, you know, you're just down there. And then when the Russians like start to make a push, you know, sound the alarm, everybody kits up, get up the stairs, go fight for a couple hours, kill them all, and then go back down. So it was weird. It was like kind of chill. And then, all right, hey, it's time to fight. Everybody go, let's go, get up, bang it out, and then go back down. We did that like probably like 2 or 3 times a day. You know, they would push pretty hard 2 or 3 times a day there.
What's also weird about Bakhmut, and I think it doesn't happen as much ever since, because now we are evacuating cities or that are approached by a massive fight like that. But in Bakhmut, we have shops still at work.
Oh, yeah.
You spread it down from the fight.
Yeah, it was weird. It was really weird. I think in one of the basements there was like a family kind of still living because they were trying to get, I think what the situation was, they were trying to get evacuated out from a further position and they just couldn't move them out safely, and so that's why they were there. I don't think they were living there at that point, but yeah, it was kind of weird. So it was like a mom and a daughter, I think, as well. So like we we actually asked them if we could take those guys out with us, and they're like, no, we're going to wait for a lull in the fighting until we can pull them out. And we had to leave prior to that, so they didn't come with us. But yeah, it was really strange. Seeing that, and yeah, obviously there were shops open, like, of course they were mostly in basements and stuff, people weren't outside, but all the soldiers and everybody knew where they were. It's just people that didn't want to leave, they had their whole life there.
Did you have any weird purchases from the businesses in Bakhmut?
Weird purchases from the business?
Memorable, some treat or...
Oh yeah, I do. One of them in there, and I'm mad at myself because I actually left it on a position. I was totally going to do it just as like I wanted to get a video of it because it would just be stupid. But I was going to go up in one of the fights with a freaking horse mask that I bought down there. And I totally forgot it on a position. I didn't ever get to do it, but I wanted to just go with my helmet on and the horse mask and get a picture of me shooting out the window just to be
Do you mean a picture?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I wish I did. I'm terrible. We didn't take phones and stuff, and I don't use GoPros usually, so I don't have a lot of pictures of the stupid stuff. So, unfortunately, it's okay. I'll do it again. I'll do it next time. I'll remember it. Yeah, exactly. Oh man.
Do some of that, unfortunately. What was the exfil for GUR from Bakhmut?
So exfil was pretty much the same as infil. We had a hard time, but we tried to plan based on, weather patterns as much as possible. So always at night, using night vision. We didn't have enough night vision for all of our guys, so everybody was paired up with someone who did have a night vision device. So we would just stay behind them, hold on to them. Usually because in Bakhmut, it was never a straight shot to go for where you were going. You had to move from position to position. And then once you finally got to whatever hardened structure that you got to, which was usually a pretty decimated, apartment complex building, you had to enter in through one side and then go through this kind of a maze, up 3 levels across, down a level over, and then into the bunker or into the basement or wherever you were. So doing that at night with night vision, with a group of 8 people, and it's so dark that you can't really see anything, was actually pretty comical, because I ended up following one of our guys, and what was it? I forgot who it was, honestly. But I was following one of them, and I lost my grip on him for a second, and he's like, hey Tango, do you know where we are? I'm like, what do you mean do I know where we are? You have the night vision. He's like, I don't have night vision. I'm like, what? I'm like, oh man, and we're trying to be quiet because there's no fighting or anything going on. So I'm like, okay man, we gotta just figure this out. So let's backtrack. I was like, oh no.
I got one for you as a Texan, because American and a special texting about your rights and your property, you're able to defend it. Shouldn't a city like Bakhmut be forcefully evacuated? And you know what?
Yeah, I do. That's tough, man. I mean, realistically, it's hard from a human rights perspective to say you have to leave here, but because it's so dangerous. But to be honest, I think, yeah, they really should, just for the sake of, from a military operations perspective and standpoint, if this is a full-scale war, you do not want to have to add one more consideration to winning a fight that's this bad, which is civilian considerations. So if you have to add, okay, I'm going to go into this building and clear it, now I have to worry about whether or not there's a civilian in there that I accidentally killed because there's not supposed to be civilians in there, right? Yeah, no, they should be evacuated. It's a nasty fight. You just need to let the armies duke it out and get out of there. I understand that people want to stay. I get it. I would feel weird about it too, but also I don't want to add to the defenders, disadvantage by being stubborn.
Do Russians have any regard for civilians?
I would say probably not. No, I really wouldn't.
Which is kind of weird, considering they claim that those people are their people.
Yeah, they say that. That's just propaganda, man. They do.
What happened after Bakhmut for your team?
For my team, after operating, there for several months, I would just decided that, hey, I'm going to go take Christmas leave. I hadn't been home at that point for almost a year, and then I left. After that, some other guys in the team left and went to other teams, and the team just got dissolved. We didn't have enough people to sustain it. So yeah, the team was just everybody kind of went their separate ways.
And so you came back and there was no team for you anymore.
Yeah, no team. I had planned on coming back and was coordinating with them while I was in America. And I was supposed to go and actually attend a sniper training school when I came back so I could add an additional thing to my skill set and I could help
Finally
out.
become a sniper.
I know, finally become an actual sniper. Yeah. I was supposed to come back and do the school, but the team kind of split, so there wasn't support for that. So I just came back and I started training. I actually worked with the 4th Brigade of the National Guard, RUZIB, and was training them for a few months. And then I heard about Chosen Company, started to work with them.
How did you hear about them?
Actually, my really good friend Goldfish, who I was an instructor with Trident Defense Initiative, he met Ryan through mutual contacts and was telling me about a team that was kind of working.
Ryan is the leader of Chosen Company.
Yeah, Ryan O'Leary, and so he was like, it's a good unit, this is what we're about, like you should come check it out, you know, we need a good medic. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, you know, come check it out. And then kind of just went.
What impressed you about the Chosen?
Their ability to plan operations, the rehearsal and the rigid, like the training environment. So actually training every day and training for specific missions, not just generalized, we're going to go to the range and shoot, or we're going to do this. It was a lot of good organization, basically assigning people roles, making sure people trained to do those roles, and cross-train and work with everybody else so that everybody had, you know, like different skill sets that mesh together. So that was really important to me. And I hadn't seen that or heard about that from other units really so much. So that's what I liked about it.
A lot of people are saying that Chosen Company has a unique culture in a way. Some people love it, and we had also people who hated it because there was a lot of dark humor, a lot of kind of kidding around.
Yeah, man.
It's a weird mix of cowboy shit and like proper training. How do you maintain that balance, and how did you personally find that culture?
I mean, yeah, I loved it. It was great. I feel like I got along with everybody really well. I mean, I know some people had that didn't, but man, like, you know, we're war fighters, right? You got to have thick skin. Like, people are gonna talk a lot of smack and they're gonna give you a hard time, and it is what it is, man. It's part of it. That's a natural thing for all soldiers from any culture that you come through. You know, that's how it's gonna be. So, like, you know, there was a lot of professionalism, and then there was some, you know, some FAFO stuff, like, but in this environment where that changes so much, sometimes you have to do that. Like, you can't be perfectly safe about everything. It is a war. Like, so sometimes you actually do just have to be like, okay, well, you know, we don't have a better plan, so we're doing this, let's go. There's a good quote, and I forget who it's from, maybe Marcus Aurelius, I forgot, but he said like something about there's more is always lost from indecision than a bad decision, or it's a paraphrase.
Hey kid, we have quote from Marcus Aurelius. Everybody who's 19, sign up.
So, but yeah, man, I mean, it's military culture. Like, we don't sit on a base. Everybody in Chosen came here to fight. We didn't come here to like sit in the back, really. So once the training is done, the training is not just training for the sake of training, it's training to complete specific objectives. And that's that. You train hard, you do your job, and like, you do it well, and you apply yourself. Like, that's it. Even if the culture is weird and everybody gives you a hard time, people will still respect you a lot if you just show up, do your job, and put the effort in. That's it. That's all anybody ever asked in Chosen.
Another aspect of the culture of Chosen is that you guys are very emphasized on assault missions. Trench ops, hard on assaults, while some other guys will be like, yeah, maybe defense is a little bit safer, maybe, you know, maybe we need to start building up the force before that, we need to entrench ourselves, we need to build a solid base behind us, that kind of stuff. How did it came to be that Chosen is so focused on assault missions?
It was more what I think, because we talked a little bit about the history of Chosen and the other interview, but they came from, I think, 2nd Battalion it was, and weren't maybe not really satisfied with the mission set that they had there, so they wanted to focus on finding one that was more of an offensive mission set. That was just kind of a group decision. That's what guys wanted to do. Like, they didn't want to sit in trenches and eat artillery. They wanted to be raiders. We hit it, clear it, and get backfilled, and then we leave, and then we go and we do it again. Like that was the objective, and it was just a group decision that everybody decided, hey, you know, we're fighters. We came here to fight. We don't want to sit back. We want to be a part of the direct action, and this is how we're going to do it.
There's a massive perception that being on an assault is always much more dangerous. And I spoke to Han about it, and he has a different approach of it. He thinks that a very well planned assault operation can be actually less dangerous if it goes by the plan.
Yeah, I think it absolutely can. If you utilize all of the elements that you need to do that and it works out, it is actually less dangerous. If you can take the enemy by surprise, you know, if you can utilize any kind of stealth or, you know, deception that you need to hit them where they're not expecting it and utilize that to focus on their weak points, then yeah, absolutely. Because it's almost guaranteed that if you're sitting in a trench, regardless of how long, eventually you're going to get hit, whether it's from mortars or fighting off an assault. It's usually going to be a drone or a dropper. Like, you're going to get injured. That's it. But if you hit them where they're not expecting it and you do it fast, you utilize, you know, everything that you need to win a gunfight, which is, you know, speed, surprise, balance of action, and momentum, then yeah, you're probably going to come out of that okay. Where I disagree a little bit with Khan is the follow through on that, which is, yes, the assault will probably go well. In fact, we are freaking like 10-0 for gunfights. We've never lost a gunfight to a Russian trench at all. We've killed them every single time that we get into the trench and fight. But it's the backfill, it's the follow through, the mortars, the artillery, and the other stuff that just eats us up afterwards that causes actually the majority of our casualties. As we're approaching, like as we're making the assault, we've taken very few casualties on that. So room for improvement, but yeah.
You think if Ukraine had more artillery, more shells to back up an assault, or once the assault already happened, to maintain the position, to cover it up with artillery, or maybe with armor, maybe to reinforce it with armor, maybe to reinforce it with troops, would it be different, or is it just the nature of those ops?
Absolutely. No, it would absolutely be different. To my understanding, and I'm not an indirect fire mortar man or an artillery man or anything like that, but the trick to keeping artillery and all the other, you know, indirect stuff off of your assault units is keeping them busy with counter battery. So if you have the ability to match them toe to toe, or even overpower them and destroy their assets, or at least to distract them so that they don't have time to move, set up fire, you can track and engage them effectively with your battery, then that occupies them and they're enabled to do their job. That is kind of the whole point. So yeah, if we had more assets to do that, if we had more shells, if we could match the Russians like toe to toe and keep up, then 100% there would be a much better chance of not just survival, but, you know, making solid gains on the battlefield.
When you just joined Chosen, correct me if I'm off, but when you just joined Chosen, there was a very brief period in time where at some sectors of the battlefield we achieved at least like something like parity in terms of shells. Mm-hmm. The case, or they still outnumbered? I don't really know. That's I guess that's kind of maybe above my level. If I could guess. So just your perspective, because you've been in the art, you didn't feel it on this camp.
So I would say like, yeah, right when I first got to Chosen, because, you know, we base everything on, it's all dope data on previous engagements. So I know that right when we first went there, I'm not going to get into SOPs, but we had like a certain amount of time to get out of the vehicles to assault, get into the trench before we could expect mortars. And this was something that we tested by, you know, just doing reaction checks. So yeah, like at that point, it was better and it was a lot easier for us to operate. Now, that being said, I'm sure once the Russians started losing positions, they also would refocus some of their assets to bring guys in to prevent that from happening. So, like, you know, they adapt very well. They're not stupid. They've been doing it for a long time. Like, they will adapt if you give them the chance.
In general, how does the fight feel? Is it always David versus Goliath, or is it equal militaries, full send?
Well, I'd say it's not really a David versus Goliath. I've never kind of looked at it like that, in the sense that Ukraine has done a stellar job of holding, maintaining, and fighting since the beginning of this, even with overwhelming odds. I'd say the Kyiv offensive, like from the Russian side, that was a David versus Goliath for sure. And we kicked their asses, so that's awesome. Since then, the conventional stuff on the other sides, I think it's been a little more closely matched.
How can it be closely matched if, by all accounts, Russians outnumber Ukrainians?
Well, the lucky part about that is we have a defender's advantage. We have home turf, we have established routes and support, local support ringing in, and we have the ability to sit back on the defensive in, defendable positions and engage as they try to assault. That is the defender's advantage. Statistically, it takes 3 casualties to kill 1 defender, like 3 assaulters to kill 1 defender. That's where the perception comes that like it's more dangerous to assault than it is to, defend. So that is actually an advantage that you have. If you utilize your defensive capabilities correctly, that's why I think that's where like we're kind of able to match them, is we are utilizing good defensive strategy and obviously, modern technology to amplify that.
What do you say to those who claim that there is no sense in this fight because whatever you put up to Russians, they will still outmatch it, outnumber it, because they just have so much more manpower, vast resources, and the determination to basically die for the cause?
Man, I mean, I won't lie. I've seen it. We are fighting the horde. Like, they are a freaking horde, and they will not stop sending soldiers, just meat waves. Like, that's how they win. That's the Soviet mentality. You throw bodies at the problem until you win, and they're gonna keep doing it until something changes. I don't know what, but man, yeah.
Is there a point of fighting that back?
Absolutely. You don't quit just because something's hard, okay? It's worth fighting for. This is freedom. This is Ukrainian land. People have bled for this. My friends have died for this. I've bled for it. So I'm not done. Maybe I can't fight anymore because of injuries or whatever, but I'm still gonna find a way to help. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it. Like, you commit. You don't quit. There is no quitting. Like, that's it.
By any means necessary.
That's it. And if everybody dies and we go out, like, you know what? Even if they win, they're gonna know they've been in a fucking fight. And that's if that's all you can do, then that's what you do.
We've touched more operations with Chosen in a different video that hopefully will come out anytime soon. But I want to talk about the injury experience that you had. You were severely injured on one of the ops with Chosen company,
yeah.
And then you had a lengthy recovery period.
Yeah.
What was it like, and both mentally, and what was the process for you?
Mentally and physically, obviously it hurt. Like, I think I probably got blown up by 4 to 5 grenades, took like 15 pieces of shrapnel. It hurt, but honestly not as bad as I thought it would hurt. I've never been blown up by a grenade before, so I was just like, I thought, oh man, grenade, it's just gonna kill you automatically. It actually wasn't like as bad as that. Yeah, it freaking hurt, but like, whatever. The physical part of it, yeah, it sucked. It did hurt, but like once I got out of that, like once I got actually off the battlefield and into like the evac, like van, the ambulance, the vehicles or whatever, that's like kind of where it hit me. I probably had a TBI and I was a little, shell shocked from all the explosions and everything that happened and blood loss. But I would say that like going through the recovery process was actually worse than getting injured because it just sucked to be in a hospital for that long. Not that the hospitals were like bad, but just being through that mentally, that's where it really takes a toll. It took a toll on me. Just like having to go through that and like wondering, okay, so I'm injured, I've got it. Like, how bad is it? How long is it going to take to heal? And am I going to be able to continue fighting after this? But I knew that I had nerve damage at one point, was hoping for best recovery on that, but that's still kind of yet to be seen. So working through that, it was, well, going through the hospitals in Dnipro, they were super overcrowded at that point. So it was kind of all hands on deck, and it was a little bit difficult to communicate and kind of get some of the stuff done that we needed to do. So I actually ended up like kind of just helping and even rebandaging my guys and stuff because the nurses were so busy. During this time, this was the big, the counteroffensive. So Dnipro is the hub for that. They're getting it all from the south and the east and everywhere. It's all getting flooded into there. So it was a little difficult there. But once we got like rerouted from Dnipro to Kyiv and we got all of our guys there, the experience was much better. We were worked with both military and civilian hospitals. The staff were incredibly friendly and very helpful. They tried to help us as much as possible. And after that, several of us decided to work with some different organizations to help us get treatment outside of Ukraine, mostly because the hospitals and the treatments and surgeries that we needed were so backlogged, it would have taken us longer to get the treatment here than it would to utilize the other options. And like the whole time that you're in the hospital, all you're thinking of is, I got to get back in the fight. Like, I've got to get back in the fight. I don't want to be here. I want to get back to base. I want to get back in the fight.
Have you ever felt relief when you got hit? Because, hear me out. Some people, they want that escape from the fight, and they want like a big dot that says, yeah, you've been there, you've done it, it's enough. You did your best, you tried your best, now it's others people's turn. And others are like, nah, I'm not done yet.
No, absolutely not. I've never had that thought. And I would probably say that like all of the people in Chosen would not think like that. In fact, I had to fight against guys that were injured after I had gotten back to base to tell them, stay in the hospital. You need to stay there. If you come back to base too soon, you're just going to make the problem worse. Take your time and heal. Like, that's actually kind of a constant battle, because they are hard chargers and they want to go fight, and they don't care if they're injured. And we actually had problems with some going out on missions immediately after they got back to from the hospital, and they weren't clear for stuff like that. So it's just like, come on, But that's really the level of motivation that these guys have,
When you realize that at least for a significant amount of time, you are not in a fighting shape, you cannot fight anymore.
Yeah.
We see a lot of interviews from fighters who came back from that experience, who found their purpose, found their way to occupy themselves. But we never hear from people who are in the midst of that situation, like figuring it out, what to do.
Yeah.
And you're kind of in that moment right now.
Yeah, it's true. I just try to take it one day at a time. I don't know exactly what capacity I'll be able to work or aid in the fight later. I know that I can come back and be an instructor and teach people. So I'm thinking that maybe that's an option in the future. I'd like to do that. I've done it before and I have the experience. So like, it makes sense to do it now that I have more experience, more relevant experience, especially. So it'll either be that or, I don't know. It's in the air right now. So like, we'll just see where it lands.
Obviously, it's going to be a situation with not necessarily other Legionnaires, but a lot of Ukrainian fighters as well who might watch this interview. Do you have any tips you might share? How do you keep your brain occupied? How do you distract yourself? How do you... And especially since you've already been in the military and you kind of made a successful transition to the civilian life.
Right.
And that's what's gonna be ahead of a lot of Ukrainian soldiers. How do you prepare yourself mentally for that?
Man, in my best experience, the thing that helps me the most is to stay busy. I like to work with my hands, so I like to build stuff. I'm like a blacksmith a little bit. I like to make knives and other fun stuff like that. So I just keep yourself busy and try to focus on learning skills that you want to learn. If you have the opportunity to do it, try to learn a skill. Learn a skill that'll either make you a lot of money or that you'll enjoy being able to do. That's really what's gotten me through a lot of it.
A lot of people say that hobbies carried them through.
Yeah. Well, skill hobbies.
Yeah. That's like enforcing what you're saying.
Yeah. So hobbies are really good. Having something you can focus on that takes your mind off of like whatever you're thinking about, whether it's worried about your future, what you're going to do, finding your purpose again, or the fact that it really does suck to kind of be in a moment where you're like, yeah, you can't fight anymore, like that. That's actually it's a gut check, man. Like, it's a kick in the balls to a lot of people, and myself included. So it does take time to recover from that. But just be patient and not just be patient like with yourself, but be patient with your family and your friends too, because they are trying to understand you. I guarantee it. They may not know how, but they are trying, and it's a process that you have to work through together to like find a good outcome.
I've seen a lot of wounded veterans who are super rude to their families. you know, they treat them like you don't know where I've been through, and it's even weird to see that, because in hospital when you visit them, they're super nice and chill to other veterans, super polite, super like, you know, camaraderie, brotherhood, and then they will be very, very rude to their wife or spouse or significant other or, you know, kid or mother, and a lot of people talk about what the family should do, that they should be there for the vet, be patient. How do from the perspective of a veteran, how do you approach your family? Do you try to communicate with them, or should you close yourself? Should you distance yourself? What's the better way to do?
Well, so what you're talking about is it's a normal reaction to, you know, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what a lot of vets and people are going to be facing after this. I've dealt with it before as well, and, you know, do still from time to time. And I guess the best thing is, like, for that is, recognize that it's a normal response, but it's not a good response. It is something that you can improve on, and you should try to improve on. You can't, like, your family might not know what you've been through, but they still want to be there to help. And they're probably not doing anything with, like, bad intentions. So that really falls on the soldier to look at themselves and like kind of come to terms with that. It is a response to trauma, you know, it's extreme and like frightening in extreme situations. So like eventually you're going to have to deal with that. And it might take a long time to do it. But I would suggest utilizing any mental health resources that you have, seeking therapy, seeking groups of other veterans, and talking with people that have been through that experience before and have found a way to pull themselves out, because they might have a path for you to follow. And additionally, keeping yourself busy and, you know, working with your hands, just doing something so that you don't have to like deal with the anxiety and the chaos and stress that might be going on in your head.
Would you say sticking up to other veterans is a good idea, or will it keep you in the circle all of the time, you know? Because some veterans, they don't have the family. It can be, right?
Yeah. I think that, so so you don't want to keep yourself in that circle. I don't think necessarily that talking with other veterans is going to like keep you in some sort of perpetual cycle. But it is good to just like be able to say stuff out loud about that, because a lot of people feel like, you know, I can't tell my family about some of the experiences that I've had here, but I know that I can talk to my other guys, like my friends, about it, because they were there, they experienced it, or they experienced something similar. You don't have to tell your family all the details, but you can generalize it and talk to them about it, because they do want to know, and they want to know what you're feeling so that you can help. And if you don't have family, there are, I'm sure, lots of support groups and NGOs and resources that you can use to sort of reach out and find professional help to help you deal with that, because it's not a good way to live. It is a way that a lot of people live, and you can live like that, but it's just, you won't get as much out of life if you don't address it.
What is very worrying is that we saw a lot of struggles that American veterans who came from Iraq and Afghanistan encountered, and the United States is a rich and powerful country that can take care of their own, and you have programs, you have resources.
Right.
What do you do with a situation where that is on a much larger scale? In terms of just the percentage of the population.
Yeah. Man, it's really going to fall down to a lot of either government or private reform regarding veterans benefits and veterans support. So it's going to fall down to either government policy or privatized groups that take it upon themselves to work and address that issue realistically.
You're hoping to go back to the States for a brief period of time and then back to Ukraine, if I understood that?
Yeah.
What is that you miss the most about the United States?
Oh man, tell you, I miss Sonic foot-long chili cheese dogs. I've been thinking about that for like 6 months, and that's the first thing I'm gonna do as soon as I get back is eat a foot-long Sonic chili cheese dog.
That's a good way to wrap it up.
Cool. Yeah, man. That was a good interview. I like it.